Right, are we ready?
We are ready. Yeah.
So, welcome, Simon, to First Impressions.
Thanks very much, Jem. Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Let's discuss how we met. Do you remember the day we
Oh,
met?
yes. Oh, yes. It was in Leeds Student Union, Leeds
Yep,
University Student Union. I was leaving a meeting. I think it was probably with Aidan.
yep,
And I was walking either to the toilet or to leave. I can't remember. But behind me were you and I think Mel and one
yep.
other person.
Okay.
And then it gets a bit fuzzy. I can't remember whether you made me come and meet with you immediately or whether you made me set a date to come and meet with you again. But I remember then sitting in the room, which was close to where you were, and having really good conversation with all of you when you were SABs, Leeds about the world, NUS, Leeds, and everything in between.
Yes, definitely. So it was very much I'm going to say air quotes, professional setting. But when you're a student officer, I'm not going to lie, there's definitely not much professionalism. I mean, it's your first job, you're learning about the world. But what I remember about you was you treated everyone the same. When you're a student officer, a lot of the time, you can be patronized. People will think that they don't know what they're on about. And yeah, we sometimes didn't know what we're on about because it was our first job. We didn't know what we were doing. And you're given a lot of responsibility at a very young age. But yeah, I remember you coming in and I think you were talking about your past and what jobs you'd had, and it's gonna kind of lead us into the conversation we're having today. But you were talking about your experience within sexual health and raising awareness. And I'm not going to lie, the whole of us student officers were giggling. That so I'm so sorry. Our first meeting was, I can't remember what happened, but one person was nudging the other, and so very silly. But it was fun, and yeah, I think we got a really nice sort of introduction as to who we are, and we can be silly and serious.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember that meeting as being fun, you
Yeah,
know. So, yeah, doing good work doesn't have to be serious. We can have fun and work at the same time. But also, that bit about treating people seriously, I think the magic happens when you've got people with different perspectives and different ideas and different life experiences. And I don't know what it's like to be 20 or 30 now, in the same way that I don't know what it's like to have all sorts of experiences. So the student movement is at its best when you've got the people with more experience at work and then people with new perspectives and fresh ideas because it is early at work. Yeah, that's where student unions can really just get such a load of innovative, pioneering, change making sort of work.
yeah, definitely. I think I learned the most about life when I was in the student movement. Like, there were so many things that I didn't understand, and in one way, I was scared to ask questions because it was almost like if you didn't know, then you didn't know, and what are you on about? But then in another, in the safety of your little group, you could be like, what's going on there? Like what's happening? It was a very unique situation.
Yeah, I mean, and just think from a leadership perspective, when we're thinking about leaders, how many people, yourself included, that go out and change the world, having had that experience of,
Yeah,
of being in the student movement. Yeah, really special.
no, definitely. Anyway, we're not gonna go all about student politics because we could be here all day. We're gonna go right to the beginning. I'm really because obviously I only knew you from, well, I don't want to out your age, but you know,
Well, I would have been in my 40s by the
you would have
time
been
we
in your
met, Jen, and I'm now in
40s.
my 50s. So
Yeah. So there's a lot to cover. I would love to know, what were you like as a child, and what were people's first impressions of you as a child onwards, would you say?
I grew up in Cornwall,
Yeah.
and I say where I grew up because it was so particular to how I learnt about being a child and how I live my life now. So I grew up, in that very countryside way, pre-mobile phones. So nobody knew where you were. So we'd go to the stream, we'd go to the farm, we'd go to, see people who had just had, new animals being born. The local farmer lent me a pony. So, and my mum and dad and I had one older brother who's about 4 years older than me. So we lived a very straightforward life in which, it was very lovely. We went out for bike rides and we went to church on Sundays. And at the one hand, I was very, very well behaved. And on the other, I was apparently very precocious. And the precociousness wasn't from a desire for me to be rude. It was just, I tended to see things as I saw them. And I hadn't learned the art of not saying everything that you thought at that particular time. But mostly I was obsessed with ponies and horses. I remember the time that we went to visit Sandra's house and they put me on a pony called Toby. And I knew that I never wanted to get off. And a friend's daughter, Tanya, had come and she was going to have a ride after me. And it was the first time that I felt envy in my life. And I was like, I don't want to get off, but more, I don't want you to get on. I just wanted
Oh,
it to be. So I spent a lot of time just with the horse, with the dog. Was really lucky. The local farmer lent me a pony to ride, and then mum and dad got me one which I borrowed. So yeah, it was great. And then people's first impressions. I think this is such an interesting question. I think people have always, as a child, right the way to now, assumed that I'm much more self-assured than I am.
interesting.
And there are two things in that. One is, I'm a person who believes that there is always more than one way of thinking about something. So sometimes I wish I was one of those resolute, it's this way or it's this way, but I generally like it's probably, lots of different ways are possible. So that makes it quite an interesting sort of way. So I can sit and listen to somebody and be like, oh, you're right. And then I can listen to somebody who says the exact opposite and be like, oh, you're right too. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what does that mean for me? And then I've also, who knows whether it's about being gay? I suspect it is about growing up and hiding parts of who you are for a long time because you thought that other people wouldn't like who you were. I think just gives that slight sort of edge of protecting myself. And it took me a long time to realize that protecting yourself by hiding yourself because you thought other people wouldn't like you isn't protecting yourself at all. That's protecting other people.
Yeah.
But it, I think, has just left that little bit of self-doubt. There's always, I will come away from most conversations or most podcasts or most interviews going, did I do a good enough job on that? So I present a much more confident exterior than what sometimes goes on in my head, but I have learned how to just say, be quiet, you're all right, you're good enough.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, and definitely can resonate with both of those. I think when you said about agreeing with people, I feel like I want to be that. Sometimes I'm, 80-20 rather than 50-50. But I really struggle sometimes with feeling almost fake. And I know I'm not,
Mm.
but because I listen to people and now I'll think, oh yeah, you're right, and then you're right. But then I'll think, oh, I've almost like you've sinned because you feel like you what's that? Like going behind someone's back almost.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that? Do you just say it like and own it?
I think so. I think so because it is right, isn't it, that the world is full of people with different views.
Yeah.
And so my view is often it's okay to have those different views.
Mm,
There are some things, of course, which I'm absolutely hard
yeah.
and fast and uncompromising on. But even on those things that I'm hard and fast on compromising on. So I believe that when we die, we die. My partner believes that there's a whole raft of lies, and I listen. I'm like, it's fine for you to believe that, and for me to believe this, and sometimes get swayed. Well, maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, on everything, we all have a right to believe what we want to, as long as we're not hurting other people, and that's the bit which I think we've lost. And to your point about going behind people's backs, what I guess I would never say is you're right. It would be that's a really interesting perspective, or you have the
Mm,
right to believe that, or of course we can have different views and still be friends here.
yeah.
Um, and in a world which I think has become more and more polarized, that feels to me like one of the most important things that we can perhaps have is an understanding that there is no one world view.
Yeah.
And if we can navigate our way, finding ways to not hurt other people whilst living with our own moral compass, wouldn't that be amazing?
Oh yeah. I think I'm actually a little bit scarred by, this, are you this or are you this? And if you're not. So that's a really helpful way. Because you can understand someone but not agree.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just vocalizing
Yeah.
and taking that in.
Well,
But yeah,
it's agreeing with their right to have that view,
yeah,
isn't it? And and I think even in the most polarized of topics, it is still important for people to be able to express their view. But that common bit is we all have human rights. So your right to believe something about me should not limit my right to express myself, and we should not be hurting each other
yeah,
along the way. So perhaps it's slightly idealistic as you say it out loud, but ultimately that is the world which would be a kinder world and a more compassionate world.
yeah. And actually, what you said secondly about hiding yourself, I wonder if that's almost works together because you had to hide yourself. You want to allow other people to express themselves,
Maybe. I
not
hadn't
to
thought
get
about that
therapy.
before.
Yeah,
Yeah, there is perhaps an element of that, and so if I think about being gay and growing up, so through I was born in 1974, so right was really understanding and learning right in the eye of the AIDS epidemic, as that was going, and people were frightened. That doesn't mean that people's behaviour was good. It means that it gives you a lens to understand how sometimes bad behavior is not driven by uh, nastiness, but driven by fear or lack of understanding or lack of awareness. So when I first came out to my mum and dad, who've always loved me and supported me, but my mum was really worried about. She'd never met anyone who was gay at this point, in her early 30s, or she didn't know, no one that she'd known was, and she was frightened that I wouldn't have a good job, that I'd be bullied, that I'd be hurt, that I might die earlier than she wanted me to. And she sometimes behaved badly as a result of that. But understanding what it was that drove some of that was really, important. And I think if we take time, if we only listen to the sound bites, we're always going to agree or disagree. When you learn to understand and to get a bit deeper, even when we don't agree, we can still like people. And if you look at some of the most amazing leaders in the world, Mandela, for example, that's exactly what they did.
yeah,
They and do. They learn to understand. They learn to work through. They learn to forgive. And not, obviously religious connotations around forgiveness, which would not be part of my day to day. But that sense of understanding in order to find ways to work through things.
yeah. No, definitely, I agree. And I think almost when we have to listen to different points of view that we're a bit uncomfortable about as well. Like it is uncomfortable to hear the close friends and family say things that you're like, oof. Like I always remember when my friend called me a fire hazard. Like he said it so flippantly that I was in the way. He was just thinking, if there's a fire, no one can get through because Jem's chair's there.
I think it's so important, isn't it? And as you, A, I'm sorry that that happened, and B, I'm glad that you had a word with a friend, and C, I hope they listened to you.
Yeah.
But it's those moments sometimes where people do have the opportunity to learn and to understand
Mm,
if they are given the chance. And that's not to take away the the impact that it had on you
yeah.
in that moment, but the alternative is that we don't learn because we don't listen and we don't understand and we also don't tell. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's difficult, isn't it? Because there are some lines and some lines don't get crossed. And when they do get crossed, people have to know and get the feedback. But equally, we are all, so if we think about how much there is to know, and
Mm,
how little each of us knows at any one time. And we just, we eke out through our experiences just a bit more.
yeah. Oh, definitely. And you mentioned about leadership, and I kind of want to move on to later on in your life. I would say that you're a person who you've always worked in areas where taboo is so old school. I don't know what the right word is, but topics that we're nervous to talk about, or if you're not in it, you don't know it as well. So, can you take us through a little bit of your sort of career and why you've
Mm.
chosen to talk about the topics that you have?
Yeah. So the way that I often talk about them, Jem, is to say they're things that some people don't like talking about.
Okay.
Because in that, what you're identifying is that some people are absolutely fine talking about it. So, you will be much more confident about talking about aspects of disability and ability and inequality and those perspectives than I and some other people might be. I will be more confident talking about some things, as a child, we're not nervous about talking about something, all of that sort
Yeah.
of sense. And so I just like, because when people talk about them as taboo topics, exactly as you said, it's like, well, they're not taboo for everyone. For people who are
No.
living that, for people
Yeah.
who day-to-day reality is affected by that, it's not taboo. It's just their lived experience. So it's completely by accident. My whole career has been by accident, but I suspect that that's just that type. Yeah, that when you asked before about, is that from your lived experience? It really is, because I think subconsciously what I learned as a child was not talking about something is more harmful than talking about something, however clumsy we might be, and that silence doesn't do anybody any favors. Sometimes we need to learn not to say something, but
Yeah.
but silence around an issue doesn't do anybody any favors. So I was lucky. I got, I went, I was meant to be an educational psychologist, so my whole career has been accidental. But I got a job running a sex education project for young men. By default, I became an expert because nobody else was doing it. And I met an amazing woman called Jill Lender, who she was at the time, now called Jill Francis, and she later became my boss at the National Children's Bureau. And we had a department which looked at volatile substance abuse, sex education, the needs of rural children. We had Children with HIV Forum. We had Children's Play Council, all sorts of topic areas that people either didn't think childhood bereavement network, people didn't think were important, didn't think children should be exposed to, or didn't understand that that was their reality. And it was just amazing learning how many lives are affected either negatively or positively by having adults or somebody that they can trust who will talk openly and honestly about their experiences, will understand how to remove obstacles and barriers, will know how to amplify the needs and rights of children and young people, and just do the littlest things to make a real difference. We so often think that things take money and take time, when actually so many things just require us to open our eyes and think a bit differently and be a bit more human in our responses. So yeah, I mean, much to that day when you were giggling in Leeds Student Union, I guess I learned that people will respond differently
Yeah.
to different things at different times. And our job is to keep on talking about things so that overall, there's a culture as communities, we get better at talking about issues. So that children, young people, and adults, because of course, what I had thought when I was in my 20s was that I'd be sorted by the time I was 30. What I've learned when I got to 40 was that I thought I'd be sorted by the time I'm 50. And you never quite catch up with yourself. You're just, all the time thinking that young, is older than it is or whatever. So by the time I'm 60, I'm going to be sorted.
Oh yeah.
So I think it's that bit about how do we just do things a bit differently to open up conversation. And just to go back to the student movement, it is, of course, what the student movement does so well,
Yeah.
because the lives are current and are now and are living with the current reality. So always that sense of what I've noticed since leaving NUS is the things the student movement was talking about 5 years ago, society tends to be talking about more widely 5 years later. You think about anti-racism, think about all sorts of issues around equity and equality. The student movement was talking about them before the rest of
Yeah,
us were in wider society.
true. Oh, powerful.
Mm.
So we need to listen to students more, basically.
Probably.
No, that is so true, and I think what I'm getting from you there as well is that there's no one set way of educating people, and I guess your career has been about how do you, put forward a really sometimes sensitive topic or, personal topic, and I guess what my question is there might be people listening who have got a really big passion about something, whether something hard has happened or, and they think, "I'm gonna do something about this." What would you say to those people who feel almost a bit lost, like no one's listening?
Mm.
Like what can the first steps be to push that out?
I think the first thing I'd want to say is do the things that you're passionate about. Be driven by the fire in your belly. Find ways to do things. If somebody says you can't do it, it just means they don't know how to. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you can't. And you know, use all the tools and expertise and people around you to find a way that works for you
Mm.
would be the first thing to say, and never settle for doing something which doesn't ignite that fire in the belly. If you've got something you're passionate about, go for it. I think the second bit would be invite people into the conversation. Don't tell them what you think they need to hear.
Yes.
So often we will resist and we'll close off. If somebody says you've got to believe this,
Mm.
then we'll go, no, I don't. Whereas if you say, can I have a conversation with you about this, and this? People will often say, yes, of course. And so that sense about dialogue, creating conversations to create change, feels to me the way to go. And I've not always been brilliant at it. There have been times when I've definitely been like, I've got my soapbox and my placard and I want to tell you. And
Yeah.
there are also some red lines in the sand where actually, belief about things is so strong that it is. Actually, I want you to understand why. But equally, if I want people to understand my perspective, I do
Yeah.
have to understand theirs. Don't have to agree with them. It goes right back to the conversation earlier.
Yeah.
But I do have to listen. And lots of our platforms now are less about listening and more about telling. And I understand that, but I'd be really interested in your views. So when you post something on Instagram, I don't always look in the comments, but when I do, there's often lots of other experience, expertise, consolation, celebration. And that feels to me as important as the original post. And I've noticed that you engage with
Yeah.
that a lot of the time. Lots of people don't. And I know time is of a premium and we don't always have time to respond to everything and you'll miss things and all those sorts of things. But if you are a content creator, it's not just about creating the content, it's engaging with what the content offers into people as well, would be my view on it.
Oh, 100% agree. And I think, like, I never want to go viral for that reason because I want to, I'll reply to every comment I can. Even if someone maybe has said something really ignorant, I did a video the other day and it was like two things I wish I could do. And someone just commented walk. And I just thought, I get it because it's a funny joke in quotes, but I just replied and said, "Actually, that's probably quite low on my
Mm.
I replied as if he'd said it to my face, and I wanted to explain, and I just thought, to me, that's the best way. If I've got the energy, that's the best way because even if he did mean it as a flippant joke, I want him to know that walking's not my be all and end all because I can do it in so many different ways, like roll and shuffle and whatever else, but he's got no idea. So I'm just gonna tell him. And then if he's rude after that, then he's gonna get blocked. And I think that's kind of what you're saying there, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And A, firstly, again, sorry you had that, but B, how brilliant that you're willing to engage with it. And the important bit in that, of course, Jeremy, is when you've got the energy, because there'll be
Yeah,
times where you just look at that and you're like, do you know what? It's been a crummy day, or I'm in
yeah,
pain, or it's, yeah, whatever. And you just think, actually, I can't deal with that. And that is also our right. We don't have to be involved in every conversation. But I think it's really important for us to reclaim conversation, even if it is in what can be microphone channels. Yeah,
yeah.
and social media drives people to do. By the way, in my view, you are viral. When I get 20 likes on something, I'm pleased. You get, yeah,
Okay.
far more than that, Jem. So you're definitely viral in my world.
Thank you. Oh, well, honestly, I could chat to you for hours, but it's one more question, if that's okay. And that is, I didn't really plan this, but actually, when you talked about your mum and you know how concerned she was when you came out, I sort of think, there might be a few people out there who have just come out, they've had that conversation. Maybe it's a parent that's listening right now. What would you say to that parent who is just as concerned?
When I was planning to come out to my mum and dad, I read a book by a woman called Anne Sheldon, I think, which was called When Your Child Comes Out.
Mm,
And in that, it was written directly to parents, but it spoke to me. It said, your child will have spent a long time coming to terms with their reality. You don't have to come to terms with this new reality overnight either. Explain to your child that, like they've had a bit of time to get used to it, you're going to have to as well. Now, that to me was the moment of going, oh, yeah, I've known this for 10 years and I haven't told them. Yeah, their response doesn't have to be perfect immediately. And as long as we own our emotions, it is okay to say, I think if we could have the time again, and Mum and I talked, a lot about this when she was dying, it would be, I'm worried rather than you're bad. Yeah, the sense that I
yeah,
got sometimes was you're bad, it's wrong, rather than she's worried about me. And of course, sometimes when we are emotional, we don't always know how to own our emotions. We don't know how to take responsibility for what we're feeling. So as a child, if somebody who's thinking about coming out or coming out, for me, that was the most useful tool. And it might be useful for others and it might not be for others. For a parent or a carer, a similar thing, which is the most important thing that I needed to hear at that time was, it doesn't matter, I love you. And everything else after that was just part of the process, because but taking responsibility for our own emotions and not always working all of that out with your child is important. And the other bit, I've had some younger people who said, and my parents were so cool with it. It had been a really big deal for me. And I told them, and they were like, oh, yeah, we've known for ages. So wherever you sit in that spectrum is recognizing that it's an important moment.
yeah,
Yeah, whatever that sense that underpins that important moment, whether it's one of joy because you know that they've trusted you, or whether it's one of pain because you know it's something that you weren't expecting. Knowing that it's an important moment for your child and validating that moment, I think, is a really important thing, because to have worked yourself up to it, which
mm,
lots of people will have done, and then be told, oh, we've known for ages, can feel like the moment was taken away from you. And
yeah,
that's a really important moment in terms of the next phase of lots of people's lives. For some people, it isn't a big deal, but for lots of people, it's a really important step in that road of understanding ourselves, and becoming, part of who we really are.
yeah. Ah, Simon, I just think you're great. Thank you so much for
Feelings
this chat.
mutual.
Oh, before we go, do you want to plug anything? This is coming out at the beginning of May, so I think you've got a big week coming up, I believe.
So my day job, which actually you probably haven't mentioned, is to be
Yeah,
Chief
sorry.
Exec of Mental Health First Aid England. I didn't come here in a role, did I? But Mental Health First Aid England, and we do training. Go onto our website. We've got lots of free resources to help people to look after their mental health day by day. May is Mental Health Awareness Week. I think it's the second week in May, and we've got some brilliant guests on some podcasts. One of them's called Jem Turner, and that will be released in Mental Health Awareness Week. And there are also resources, things that people can use. And the theme this year is movement for mental health. How do we move to look after our brains so that our brains can look after us? So yeah, if you could put the link to the website in the show notes, that'd be amazing.
Absolutely, will do. Thank you so much. And I'll
Thanks.
probably see you. Well, we'll chat online, won't we?
We will. We'll see you soon. Thanks,
Take
Jem.
care. See you later. Bye.